Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. Don't forget to subscribe. And it's Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And this past week in breaches, absolutely insane, but it's always absolutely insane. We're just getting used to the chaos, aren't we here, folks? Anyway, thank you very much to Sander Slidnerink, Jacqueline Wolf, Scott Smith, Anna Sorensen, and one anonymous tip sent in. Thank you very much to all of you. And let's dive in. We're going to start with Alaska, this scenic state, and specifically Anchorage, their largest city, because the Anchorage Neighborhood Health Center is basically on the chopping block here. They just confirmed that clinic leaders are investigating an anonymous hacker group claim that 10,000 patient records, including addresses, social security numbers, driver's license, insurance, etc., were breached. I do not know more than that, but we will figure this out, and best of luck to the 10,000 of you that were caught up in this, which I assume is like all of Anchorage. Moving on. The Lot Card and KT Corp, these are two separate companies, and we are heading to South Korea to talk about these two. Now, this is an interesting one because South Korea's Prime Minister Kim Mon-seok will hold an interagency meeting this week to essentially discuss government response measures following major data breaches at Lot Card Co. and KT Corp. Now, an estimated 200 gigabytes of personal data and nearly 300 million customers of Lot Card, which for the record is South Korea's fifth largest credit card issuer, was compromised in an incident last month, and KT, the number 2 mobile carrier, had a mobile payment breach that impacted only 362 people, but that is 362 people too much. So heads up to you if you're in South Korea and you use any of those two companies. Moving on, let's head on back to the United States. And unfortunately, we have to talk about Uvalde's basically consolidated independent school district. Uvalde, Texas, obviously the site of that tragedy a few years ago, of that shooting. So investigators said there was no data breach involved in the technology incident that shut down Uvalde schools last week. Everything apparently went down because they restored internet, security, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, all this kind of stuff. Building automation apparently went down as well. Classes resumed, and I really hope it was some kind of glug, oops, I turned off the server, as opposed to a hacking incident or whatever it is. But best of luck to you, Uvalde. Moving on. Let's do our mini segment simply entitled, If You Just Spent Money on Cybersecurity, You Wouldn't Be Getting Data Breached, You Wouldn't Be Ruining Your Reputation, You Wouldn't Be Getting, paying out, and Lord knows we wouldn't be talking about you right now, and I don't even know my own opening. And with that, let's start with WebTPA, because they just agreed to a $13.75 million class action to basically settle their 2023 data breach. Flat rate payments are available at $100 per claimant, which is actually really good for data breaches. Usually it's like $30 or something like that. So you're doing good, WebTPA folks. And if you're a member basically in California, then you are part of a subclass, thank you CZPA, and you get $50 more. So it pays to have good data security laws in your state. Moving on, Syncora and the Lash Group, they just agreed to pay $40 million to settle their class action as well. You basically are qualified up to $5,000 if you can show actual damages, and the deadline to file your claim is January 19th of next year, so hop to it. She only got a few months left. Moving on, Fortra. I don't know what Fortra does, but it sounds familiar. Anyway, a Florida judge gave final approval for their $20 million class action settlement in a multi-district litigation over theft of data. It's behind a paywall, so I don't know anything else, but heads up if you use Fortra for all your Fort or Raw needs, because you're going to get paid probably $30. Not as good as WebTPA, I'm guessing. Moving on. Metis Ind, that's Metis IND Inc. They're a software and dental billing and software company, so you know where this is going. They agree to a $5 million resolution settlement, and all the PHI they got hit. And if you basically are caught up in that mess, you have until December 29th to basically file a claim. Moving on, let's talk about MoveIt. Yeah, they're back in the news because we knew the lawsuits would be fast and furious, and basically what happened, I'm just getting wind of this, but on July 30th of this year, basically the District of Massachusetts issued 2 rulings denying motions by MoveIt's software developer known as Progress Software to basically dismiss a lot of this. The court said, nope. You are basically going to have to stand trial for allegations of negligence, breach of contract, unjust enrichment, and certain state-related unfair business practices. And here we go. Progress Software probably going to go under, and you might get $5 if you were caught up in Move It. Terrible thing. And so those were your lawsuits and payouts of the week. And if they had just spent money on cybersecurity, they wouldn't be getting breached, they wouldn't be ruining their reputation, and we sure as heck wouldn't be talking about them, which is usually how I start the preamble as well. Back into real time. Let's talk about Pollard Associates. They're a third-party administrative firm in the greater Baltimore area that administers retirement plans for employer groups. Basically, they discovered a breach around May 15th. Files were copied out of their network on the 8th. I do not know exactly what it is, but they submitted to Maine and basically said 17,907 individuals were caught up in this. I assume that's not just Mainers, given the size of the state. Moving on. This is actually a real interesting one, and if you don't remember this one from a few years back, then you're clearly not a long-time listener or follower, but we're going to go to Finland and talk about Vastamo psychotherapy. This is an update on this. Now, if you recall, and again, the Vastamo hack is considered the worst data breach in the history of Finland. That's literally how big this was for that country. So the hack and subsequent extortion of the company has had enormous effects through the entire country. We are talking about the firing of their CEO, the prosecution and sentencing, because he was convicted of their CEO. Obviously, the company went bankrupt, but patients were being extorted, and some of them committed suicide because, again, it's a mental health clinic, right? The largest, apparently, or at the time, one of the largest in Finland. So, a person named Julius, and I apologize to my Scandinavian listeners, Kivamaki, and I'm sure that's wrong, who basically he had spent years convicted in relation to the Lizard Squad gang. They took down PlayStation, Xbox, all of those. He was jailed in 2024 for blackmail of Vastamo and its patients. But there's been a development in the case because Julius, and I'm not even going to try the last name again, has been released from jail pending an appeal, which, if successful, means he could potentially sue the Finnish government for compensation, saying that he was basically in jail extraordinarily too long. And the reason why is because 28-year-old Daniel Lee Newhard, this is an American citizen living in Estonia, which is basically just south of Finland. He's been charged by Finnish prosecutors for aiding and abetting in the extortion of psychotherapy patients who received demand for cryptocurrency in exchange for not letting their data released. And so it looks like it's an American basically living next door to Finland that is going to be the issue here. So we're going to see what happens, but this is a fascinating one. You know I'll keep you up to date. Moving on, I want to give you an update on Dior. If you are a short-time listener of mine, you know every week I've been talking about Dior and where they've been declaring around the world, and they own a bazillion brands. Well, one of their brands is declaring this week, and that would be Tiffany. That's right, the luxury jewelry maker. And so heads up to you, if you shop at Tiffany online, you're probably caught up in this as well. Moving on, Insight Partners, and I actually talked about this one a while ago. They're a venture capital and private equity firm. They have investments in a whole bunch of different tech companies that usually sell products through channels like managed service providers. And they are now notifying 12,700 people that their personal data was impacted by this January breach. So they're based out of New York. Their companies include things like the Google acquisition target Wiz, as well as Kaseya and Veeam, and like a whole bunch of other basically big known players in IT and cybersecurity. And they also revealed that a threat actor behind the attack on October 25th they hit them on October 25th, and they discovered the breach on January 16th. And basically they said back in May that they had started to inform individuals impacted, but now we've got actual numbers for that. So that's obviously a huge thing, and they own a ton of companies. And so my fear is that like the Kaseyas and the Wizzes and the Veeams and everything else they own are going to start essentially declaring, and I'm never going to get any sleep on a Sunday ever again. Moving on. Prosper Funding LLC. They're a financial lending company. They discovered suspicious unauthorized activity in their internal network, and they determined that personally identifiable information was compromised. Names, social security numbers, and other customer data, including financial, were hit. So you're not very prosperous if you're using Prosper Funding, but you might want to check in. Moving on. Pensacola Hospitalist. That's a thing. Physicians LLC, obviously in Pensacola, Florida. Suspicious activity in their network detected on May 22nd. Files accessed between May 22nd and the 23rd. And a review took place on September 11th of this year. and they are now saying PII and PHI health information are caught up. Patient information, social security numbers, health insurance, dates of service, all that kind of stuff. They are not saying payment card was caught up in this as well, but heads up to you, Pensacola hospitalists, physicians, patients. Moving on. The New York Blood Center Enterprises, or NYBCE. This basically, they announced a breach back in January of this year, saying it involved a third-party specialist. The activity was confirmed to be a ransomware incident, but as of yet, no criminal group has publicly taken claim of this, even though I'm talking about this to you in September of 2025. And previously, the center reported that 193,822 victims were caught up in this, and that's according to the filing they did with Oregon. Quote, "We do not collect or maintain contact information for individuals for whom we provide clinical services. As a result, we are unable to mail letters to individuals whose information may have been involved." Now, that said, now they're kind of declaring that they have that kind of information, so whoopsie doodle? I don't know, but heads up to you if you're using the NYBCE for all your blood donation needs, and thank you for donating blood. Moving on. Firewall maker SonicWall. Now, SonicWall is urging their firewall customers to reset their passwords after confirming they suffered a data incident which may have exposed their data. This is awesome for a threat detection company. Well done, guys. In a security announcement, SonicWall outlined how an unnamed threat actor was able to brute force their way into the My SonicWall cloud service. So they basically got in. Now, this tool or platform allows SonicWall firewall users, like businesses, IT teams, to back up their firewalls, all that kind of stuff, push network rules to or security policies to various stacks of firewalls if you got multiples of these things, all that kind of stuff. So basically, this is the administrative side of the firewalls where you're administering them from the cloud. Most firewalls have this ability if they're working with businesses. Worst case scenario here would put the number of impacted organizations around 25,000, meaning they have 25,000 customers, and that ain't good. So if you are on a SonicWall firewall, go change your password, especially if you're using the My Cloud feature of the SonicWall product lines. Moving on, Apollo MD. Between May 22nd and 23rd, Apollo MD Business Services experienced basically a data breach that exposed sensitive information belonging to patients treated through their affiliation. So it was a ransomware attack that the Quilin group claimed, and we're talking about everything that you would think of, all the PII, PHI, all that kind of stuff, names, addresses, dates of birth, treatment information, health insurance, you name it, is all caught up in this. Not good, Apollo MD, which is actually kind of a cool name. Moving on. Let's talk about York County in the great state of Pennsylvania. They're investigating an incident involving unauthorized access to a county email address in September of last year, according to their website. So it's taken you a year, guys. Well done. While the investigation has shown that no information was viewed or taken, they did post on September 9th that some personal data may have been accessible during this incident. And so what we are talking about here are names, addresses, social security numbers, driver's license, dates of birth, medical information, health insurance information, online usernames, passwords, and post states as well. So not good, York County, Pennsylvania. Moving on. Central Valley Regional Center in Fresno, California on July 25th, they discovered that basically an incident involving their personal data. And this is an interesting one because they just hired a new janitorial service that was contracted, and that janitorial service was discarding sensitive documents that were meant for shredding into regular trash bags along with other waste. Now, this incident occurred at one of their facilities between March 1st through July 7th. And essentially what we're talking about here is the documents containing information about individuals served by this outfit and their families between 2015 to 2025. In other words, the bags that were marked for shredding, the janitorial service was just throwing them away with the trash, which means they're ending up in a landfill and somebody can retrieve them and read them. And so what you would think is there: names, address, dates of birth, social security, medical information, other personal data. So Central Valley Regional Center patients in Fresno, California, you definitely want to check in. Moving on. Cookeville Regional Medical Center in Tennessee. Now, on August 2nd, the Reseda ransomware group claimed responsibility for hitting them and then started publishing data in the dark web. The breach was reported to Health and Human Services on September 12th of this year. I don't have much more than that right now, but Cookeville Regional Medical Center in Tennessee, heads up. Moving on. Passaic Hospitalist, again, hospitalist. It's like I never hear this word, now I've heard it twice this week. Passaic Hospitalist Services in Patterson and Passaic River Physicians in Wayne, both in the state of New Jersey. They discovered an incident on September 11th, and an investigation determined that basically they got hit and data was accessed between May 22nd and May 23rd, which seems to be very common dates that I'm noticing. This is like the fourth one that I've said that happened in May 22nd and 23rd. Somebody's been busy out there. Anyway, the compromised data may have included basically dates of birth, addresses, diagnosis information, provider names, dates of service, treatment information, and or health insurance information as well. So heads up, if you're using Passaic Health something in New Jersey, in Patterson, or the other Wayne, New Jersey. Moving on. FinWise Bank on May 31st, they experienced a security incident. They discovered on June 18th, that essentially they got hit. They launched an internal investigation and names and personally identifiable information were hit. I have no more information than that, other than the fact that as a result of FinWise Bank, American First Finance LLC is now declaring a data breach. So supply chain, here we go. I'm guessing I'm going to have more under FinWise. Moving on. Medicare Compare USA filing on behalf of Aetna, aka CVS, in their data breach in November 2024. Medicare Compare USA discovered suspicious activity in certain email accounts, and the attacker gained access between November 5th through the 21st of last year. Basically, Aetna CVS was notified on March 18th of this year that customers may have been hit, and we are talking about protected health information. And so there we go. Do not have a number on the total amount, but if you're using Aetna/CVS for insurance, your social security number and health insurance and all that fun stuff is caught up. Good times. Moving on, I want to give you an update on Coinbase, the large cryptocurrency trading platform. A court filing has identified an employee at business process outsourcing firm TaskUs as a key conspirator in that large-scale data breach that essentially targeted Coinbase in May of this year. So that breach was revealed on May 15th by Coinbase in a post that said cyber criminals bribed and recruited a group of rogue overseas support agents to basically steal customer data and facilitate social engineering attacks. And we now know that TaskUs was that outfit that the cyber criminals were approaching and successfully bribing. Not a good look for that company. Moving on. Baltimore Medical System, the largest federally qualified health center in the state of Maryland. On September 16th of this year, basically the organization said they were a victim of Brain Cipher, that's a ransomware gang in the dark web, and according to the threat actors posting, sensitive information including PII and PHI were their names, social security numbers, dates of birth, driver's license, payment information was hit, medical records, you name it. So it is going to be a mess. But if you're in Baltimore and you use Baltimore Medical System, the largest federally qualified health center in Maryland, you definitely want to check in. Moving on. Monterey Mushrooms, who are, interestingly enough, the largest producer of fresh mushrooms in the United States. I like mushrooms. Never heard of these guys. Anyway, an investigation revealed that a cyber criminal gained access to files containing sensitive information between October 2nd, through the 7th of this year. This attack hit PII and essentially claimed, Inc. ransom claimed responsibility on September 5th, including names, driver's license, passport numbers, and social security. So odds are this is more employees than customers, but heads up, if you have anything to do with Monterey Mushrooms, there you go. Moving on. The Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh. Now, they recently announced a cybersecurity incident which impacted the personal information of tens of thousands of individuals. In this incident, a cyber criminal accessed the Jewish Federation's network and may have accessed personally identifiable information. We're talking names, social security and or tax IDs, driver's license, government issue identification, dates of birth, online access to credentials, all this kind of stuff, medical information as well. I'm guessing maybe they're doing insurance. insurance. So this is a huge, huge thing. So heads up to you if you have anything to do or a member of or work for the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh. Moving on. I want to give you an update on the Social Security Administration's alleged data breach. Now, if you recall, I've talked about this, and once again, I'll just give my preamble. Cybersecurity is agnostic to politics, but we're not immune from it. And so here's what's going on right now. The commissioner of the SSA, that's the Social Security Administration, said that the information in agency databases has not been accessed or leaked after a whistleblower complaint last month alleged of security breaches by DOGE. That is the Department of Government Efficiency, their officials. So, as September 16th, a letter from Frank Bisignano, he's the commissioner of SSA, to Congress, refuted claims made by Chuck Borges. That's the former chief data officer of the SSA. So Borges alleged systemic data security violations, unlimited access to highly sensitive environments, and potential violations of SSA protocols and federal privacy laws. So those claims were laid out in a letter to Congress by the Government Accountability Project. They basically were representing Borges, and they said that a live copy was made of American Social Security data and information associated with the numerical identification system known as NumiDent, within cloud environments, and quote-unquote circumvented oversight, apparently lacks any security oversight from SSA. So there you go. You've got a whistleblower, the chief data officer, saying violations, they accessed it, they breached us. You have the head of the SSA saying, no, we didn't. And he's saying that to Congress. So I'll let you decide who you want to believe. Moving on. We've got a couple finalies for you, and the one we're going to be talking about first is NPMs, or Node Package Manager, specifically the Node Package Manager repository. Now, if you don't know what that is, and I know a lot of you in my audience are not that technical, let me just lay this out here. A Node Package Manager, this is the best way I can describe it as I was thinking about how to describe this, is like an app store for developers. But instead of phone apps, it provides small pieces of code called packages that programmers can use to essentially build software faster. So it essentially saves time because developers don't have to write everything from scratch. They can just install and use trusted code from others. NPM also helps keep all of those pieces of code organized and up to date. So here we go, because on September 15th, the Node Package Manager repository experienced an ongoing supply chain attack in which attackers executed a highly targeted phishing campaign to compromise the account of an NPM package maintainer. So, with privileged access, the attackers injected malicious code into widely used JavaScript packages, which threaten the entire software ecosystem. And most notably, the attack has disrupted several key NPM packages, including those integral to application development and cryptography. Now, as a result of this data breach, we are starting to see some disclosures. The first one to hit the news that really brought this to our attention was Crowdstrike, the threat intelligence company, the maker of the Falcon endpoint detection response software, came out and said, yeah, we're caught up in this as well, which means we're going to see a metric ton of companies coming out and saying, yeah, we're using NPMs, because again, this makes it much easier. These little packets of code, these little snippets of code make it much easier essentially for developers to quickly move through development. And so it's widely used, which means a bazillion people have probably been downloading and inserting malicious code, not realizing it because the NPM is trusted. So this is a major problem across the globe. And so that is the first finally for us today, but I want to move on to our last one. And this one, I think, speaks to a larger global issue. So hear me out here, because we're going to be talking about the Canadian Investment Regulatory Organization, or CIRO. Now, this was sent to me anonymously by a financial expert that follows me, and for the record, anonymous to you, not anonymous to me, but it was sent to me by a financial expert that follows me and is directly impacted by this one. And I have some real thoughts on this, because I think this speaks to a greater issue we have around the world. But first, let's head to Canada and talk about this breach, because a cybersecurity breach uncovered by the CIRO last month potentially exposed extensive personal information about financial advisors and other industry personnel. This incident is obviously sparking concern among affected advisors, and it's raising questions about the security of the industry's sensitive data. Advisors warned that their information was compromised in the breach discovered by the self-regulatory organization on August 11th. They're reporting that their data is now turning up on the dark web. So, one example that was cited that I could find, and for the record, I couldn't find much on this initially when I just Googled data breach, because that's usually what I do as part of my research on Sunday mornings when I'm trying to put all of this together. And I got to page 11 on Google before I could find anything about this. Now I'm using the US Google, not the Canadian Google, but here we go. So, for one instance, one advisor reported that after signing up to the risk mitigation services offered by CIRO in response to the breach, he immediately received an alert from Equifax reporting that his work email address was being used on a fraudulent online trading site. So indications that misappropriated data may already be circulating just really highlights the urgency for those affected by this breach to sign up for things for risk mitigation services, all that kind of stuff by the SRO. So the scale and scope of the breach, which basically not only affected every single firm, past and current, that belongs to the CIRO, which is like every financial firm in Canada, but includes data that goes far beyond the sort of information that's typically involved in data breaches. Because we're talking about the financial advisors to the entire country. So the detailed registration that may be caught up in this are representative names, addresses, email, birth dates, even physical attributes, including hair, eye color, height, weight. That's not something you normally don't see unless you've got them in medical records. So it may also extend to other sensitive information, passport numbers, financial information that's required by the registration process, such as security and derivatives disclosures, financial solvency disclosures, and outside business activity. In other words, you're reporting your financial health to the CIRO. So notes from regulatory investigations and civil and criminal disclosures may also be in the mix. So if you've got that in your past as well, it's out there now. So given that some of this information exposed goes way beyond that typical data that we see in a data breach, I literally just spent the last 20 odd minutes talking about, some reps have expressed concerns about the adequacy of the SRO's response to this breach. And yeah, absolutely. And so I was forwarded a copy of their breach notification by the person that tipped me off for this one. And it mentioned much of what I just mentioned, but it also notes in the letter that there was no evidence of misuse. But they can't really say that now, can they? Because we're starting to get reports of this, throughout Canada. And so, to quote my source, and I quote directly, they have all, in caps, my info. It's obscene. I'm really mad about this one. These are the people who would skewer us if we had a data breach. I know my data has been exposed before, but this one feels very uncomfortable. They have my whole life stored, and frankly, did they need all that info? And yeah, that's exactly right. That is exactly the problem here. What we have here is a situation that is all too common in the modern world, not just Canada, but it's just how much data does a government, any government, US, Canada, take your pick, how much data does a government need on its own people? Governments really do need to balance basically citizen and resident data collection with privacy. And while some industries tend to be more regulated than others, thanks to anti-fraud measures like the financial world, there has to be standards for things like collecting only the most minimal amount of data on a citizen that is required, or compartmentalizing that data based on the type of government department or ministry, and also verification by vetted third-party experts that security controls are around all of those departments or ministries, like encryption, identity access management, privileged access management, monitoring of logging and threat, security information events management, multi-factor authentication, just basically all the hoops that you would need to get through to get to sensitive data if you're working for a CIRO that is storing some of the most sensitive data on the people that are literally driving Canada's economy. This is a huge issue. So governments are slow, and unlike corporations, they can't pivot quickly on these kinds of things. Making change, even for security, it takes votes, it takes time, it takes money, and it takes personnel. This, in a rapidly growing and changing technology environment, basically means that governments need to become flexible enough to quickly adapt, which also means they need to be collecting less data on their citizens. As a privacy expert, this is 101, because the less data you have to protect, the faster you can pivot. So the Canadian government, like the American government and several other governments all over the world, are carrying massive amounts of technology debt due to the basically maintaining antiquated systems because they can't upgrade fast enough. Like here in Chicago, Cook County, for example, the entire probation system was something like 30 years old, and they just recently changed it. But for literally decades, they were running on a system that quite frankly was using antiquated technology. These are the kinds of things we see in local government, state or provincial governments, federal government. It's a huge problem. This makes governments vast in size. The governments that are vast in size, like the Canadian government, US government, it makes them ripe targets for attackers because the surface area that these governments, from local all the way up to federal, don't have good controls on these things, don't invest what they need, and quite frankly, are lagging behind the innovative security solutions that we are creating. And when you have a situation like a CIRO that is basically storing an absolute amount of data, like, my God, they wouldn't just have my credit score, for example, if I was part of this, I'm not, but they would have any investments I've made, any profits, any losses, any criminal or civil penalties against me and all of that. They would have some of the most intimate and embarrassing things I wouldn't want to get out. You'd all know I'm a hundredaire, right? As opposed to a millionaire, those kinds of things. This is absolutely insane, but it really does underscore my overarching point is that governments collect too much and governments are behind on security. And that combination is absolutely terrifying to a cybersecurity professional. So I'll leave it at that. Those were your breaches of the week. Best of luck to every financial advisor in the entire country of Canada, the second largest by geography country in the world. And I think we're all caught up in this one in some way, shape, or form, whether we realize it or not. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, please, please attempt to stay private, informed, and secure. Take care.